Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Could it be the beginning of the end of Surrey's policing saga?
There is an offer on the table, and we think it meets the needs of the City of Surrey.
A final cash offer from the province to get the city to transition away from the RCMP. Plus, a CBC documentary censored in India.
So this is part of a pattern, and I'm not surprised at all.
YouTube is complying with demands from India to ban a Fifth Estate documentary about the killing of a Sikh activist in Surrey. Also, a BC man is charged with alleged sexual assaults of children dating back to the 90s in Ontario.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thank you for joining us. Another chapter in the Surrey policing saga. Now, the province is making what it's calling a final offer to get the city to transition away from the RCMP to a municipal police force. But as our Mira Baines reports, it's unclear how much money is on the table or what the deadline is for Surrey to respond.
Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth carried a plate of cookies to an NDP caucus meeting. There are now questions over how much the province is sweetening its offer to help Surrey move to a city police force. The BC government previously offered $150 million. Farnworth wouldn't reveal how much that offer is now, but did say it was final.
What I can tell you is they have a final offer. They have an offer on the table. We have been in discussions, and I think it works for the City of Surrey, and we hope they accept it.
Is there a deadline for when they have to accept? Deadline?
The province has required the city to continue with its transition to the Surrey Police Service. However, Mayor Brenda Locke wants to keep the RCMP and has challenged the provincial position in court. Locke said in a statement that she will not be sharing any details about her discussions with the province and is continuing with legal action. BC Conservative MLA Bruce Banman suggested in the Legislative Chamber that the province is offering an additional $110 million to the $150 million.
Surrey is now being asked to accept an additional payment of $110 million to make this NDP scandal go away.
He would not clarify where he got this information. The province and the city have a court date this week and a hearing for a judicial review into the BC government's decision on April 29th. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
A BC man is facing charges in Ontario in connection with alleged sexual assaults of children dating back to the 1990s. Police say those assaults took place across various jurisdictions in southern Ontario. The CBC's Tyler Cheese has those details.
This is a composite sketch of the Woodland rapist, a man police have been looking for around 3 decades. And though they haven't confirmed a connection to that case, Peel Police confirmed today they have laid 20 criminal charges in an investigation dubbed Project Woodland.
We've arrested a male from British Columbia named Richard Neal. He was arrested and charged after a multi-jurisdictional investigation. Peel Police, Halton Regional Police, and Waterloo Police worked together.
Police say Neal has been charged with sexual assaults that occurred in Ontario between 1992 and 1995. They didn't share any additional information, saying a publication ban is in place to protect the victims. But court documents obtained by CBC News today confirm the charges include kidnapping and sexually assaulting a boy in Kitchener in August 1992, another boy in Brampton in September 1994, and a 15-year-old girl in Oakville in August 1995. Those dates line up with what CBC News has previously reported about the Woodland rapist case.
It's been over 30 years since this case has been open to close. It's fair to say that there could be many reasons as to why the arrest has happened.
Police would also not share what new information led to the arrest, but it comes at a time when advancements in DNA forensics are helping to solve cold cases like this one.
The way they would have approached this back then is you collect DNA from a crime scene, or in this case, a sexual assault victim, and that's a profile that's of unknown origin.
DNA researchers say it's becoming more and more common for decades-old cases to be solved as new technology is developed.
We're able to get more information from less DNA to the point now where we can literally sequence the entire human genome if need be. So police agencies, investigative agencies are realizing this is a brand new tool and it's incredibly powerful.
For the case at hand, police believe there may be more victims and are urging anyone with more information to contact them. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
A BC judge is warning the courts to look out for a flood of Indigenous identity fraud in criminal cases. This comes after a recent case where a man asked for special considerations in his sentencing due to his distant Métis heritage. Our Jason Proctor has been following this story, and he spoke with Leanne Young about it earlier today.
Now, what happened, first of all, in this case?
Okay, so you have this guy, Nathan Legault, who pled guilty basically to sending graphic images of himself to teenage girls that he met during the course of his interning as a pastor in other provinces. And so while he's awaiting sentencing, he learns that he has a great-great-grandparent who is Métis, and based on that, he self-identifies as Métis and asks for the special sentencing considerations that Canada's top court says are due to Indigenous offenders. And this is something the top court put in to sort of lower the incarceration rate by looking at sort of alternative means of sentencing more fit and appropriate to people who have the lived experience that they've had through the terrible things that have happened to Canada's Indigenous population. What the judge here said he's worried about is that this guy makes this claim based on nothing except a phone call and family lore, as the judge calls it. And so he says, you know, he's concerned that there needs to be some level of proof in terms of before judges that when somebody self-identifies as Indigenous, what actually is the bar in case there is identity fraud of people thinking that they can get something, a benefit here by self-identifying.
So in this case, then, was the judge actually able to determine if this former pastor, this Prince Rupert man, was he actually Indigenous?
No, that's actually, it's interesting. This is part of the whole thing. That's not the job for the judge. But what the judge says is, you know, basically in any other element of the criminal process, you have proof that's put forward. And experts I've talked to say as well, there is proof that can be given in terms of beyond a membership card or a family story, and that's what courts need to be looking at.
Okay, very interesting stuff. And of course, you know, this tsunami of possible fraud, I'm sure you'll be watching all of those cases come in. Thank you for that, Jason Proctor.
Well, Vancouver parents have rallied in support of a program for gifted students that might be leaving. It follows a decision by the Vancouver School Board to stop next year's enrollment for the University Transition Program.
It's a really great special needs program that's worth preserving, so I'm here to help fight for that.
My child was in a regular school, and she really struggled because of the unique way she learns, which is she's a neurodivergent child.
As a student, the UTP program provided me with a safe place where I could learn and be challenged together with a community of people that I connected with.
The program normally accepts 20 students a year between the ages of 13 and 15. They receive what's called an enriched academic course load in preparation for early entrance to university. Enrollment is now on hold pending a third-party review. Replacing identification cards, learning about pension plans, helping file taxes. Those are the supports people in Vancouver's downtown east side received through the Union Gospel Missions program today. As our Saurabh Sandhu reports, for some, it's the one time of the year they get this kind of help.
Len Saren Holly is at the Union Gospel Missions Super Clinic in Vancouver's downtown east side, hoping to replace his government ID.
I had my wallet stolen, so I have limited ID on me, and it's not government issued.
Haley has partial visual and hearing impairment, making the process even more challenging for him.
I usually do things on my own time.
Union Gospel Missions Super Clinic is an opportunity for many like Holly to get help with the tasks that are otherwise difficult for them.
I expected it to be a long lineup today, but it was actually quite quick.
With the tax deadline approaching, others are getting help with filing their taxes.
I got my 8 years of taxes done. I have depression and insomnia, and I just never got it done. And then I came and got the whole thing done, boom, one shot.
Some people, they don't know actually how to go online and file the returns themselves, or maybe get caught up on their personal information. And so this super clinic here today is offering that in-person support.
The Union Gospel Mission teamed up with Service Canada, Veteran Affairs Canada, and Canada Revenue Agency for the one-day event, along with participation from BC's Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. It's all to help people access assistance with their Canada pension plans and raise awareness about other financial help.
These agencies are coming together so that people have access from the downtown east side, have access to hundreds, if not thousands, of government benefits and things that they might need in their day-to-day life that might even help some exit homelessness.
This is the third such event from Union Gospel Mission. Chu says the last one in November saw over 60 people access the services. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
YouTube has censored a CBC documentary at the request of the Indian government. The Fifth Estate investigated the alleged contract killing of Surrey Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was a proponent of an independent Sikh state and also considered a terrorist by the Modi government. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe shows us what is in that now blocked documentary in India and why many in the local Sikh community are not surprised by the ban.
A murder in Surrey, British Columbia, has sparked a diplomatic crisis between Canada and India.
This Fifth Estate documentary investigating the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is blocked on YouTube in India. Part of a pattern, says one of the documentary's subjects.
To us, it just shows the lengths that India is willing to go in order to kind of silence that dissent.
The investigation revealed exclusive CCTV video of the moment Nijjar was gunned down outside his Gurdwara in Surrey. Nijjar was an activist pushing for an independent Sikh state. The Indian government says he was a terrorist. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the Indian government of being involved in his death, an accusation India denies. No charges have been laid.
The video, it has been obtained by the Fifth Estate and as per reports by Canada-based CBC News.
The documentary made headlines in India. A spokesperson says CBC News stands by its journalism. YouTube tells CBC News the video was blocked under Section 69A of India's Information and Technology Act. It says action can be taken in the interest of the integrity, defense, or security of India. Last year, the Indian government took similar action over a BBC documentary. It examined the Indian Prime Minister's role in anti-Muslim violence 2 decades ago.
The Indian government has gotten pretty aggressive in taking advantage of its own laws to pressure social media companies to take down content it doesn't like, to target actual specific users and even have accounts blocked.
And that's the CBC's Lindsay Duncombe reporting. In other news today, BC is pledging $70 million to support wine producers following both record-breaking heat this summer and that devastating cold snap in January.
BC wines are second to none in the world. We've got amazing wines, and it is your innovation and your work as farmers, as producers, that has made that possible.
Premier David Eby says the new replant program will help producers remove damaged crops and then replace them with varieties that can withstand the changing climate. The province is also setting up a BC wine grape sector task force. It'll be focused on providing practical recommendations to producers on how to remain profitable and resilient. Our Darius Madavia is here, and Darius, certainly some extreme weather patterns in the past year, but this week it looks like we're pretty mild and in fact quite nice.
It's beautiful and sunny, which would be very welcome news to agriculture farmers across the province if it weren't for the fact that so many crops have already been devastated. I mean, this is really just a pattern that we've been seeing in recent years. Last winter, I actually wrote a story about how climate change is affecting Canada's wine industries, both in the Niagara region of Ontario and here in BC, and just looking at what we can do to make those grapes more resilient. And there's amazing research being done really across both Canada and in the United States about sort of breeding these hardier varieties and how we can make new grapes out of that and just changing the way that we think about how our wine is produced. So lots of really exciting work being done in that area. But if it wasn't for all the extreme weather we've had already this year, we wouldn't really need to be worrying about that because we've had some beautiful, we're going to have some beautiful weather this week. We've already started to see that on parts of the South Coast and Vancouver Island, although for some places still a little bit of rain still coming, like in the North Island tonight and into tomorrow, but really just a low chance of that precipitation. For the most part, we're going to see this continue to clear. This is tomorrow. I would say even this is a bit of an overestimate of how much cloud we're going to get. We're going to continue to see that clear up, especially as we get later into the week. week. Tomorrow, we're going to see a lot of that cloud start to clear, and then into Friday as well. Lots of sunshine still building in, and by the weekend, really across the south coast, we've got some beautiful sunny conditions. So really going to be a great time in the days ahead. And if we take a look here in Vancouver, we are going to have a little bit of cloud into tonight, but by tomorrow, we're warm, we're sunny, a little bit cool to start the morning, but by noon, it'll be nice and double digits once again.
Welcome news to hear that. Thank you so much, Darius. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tanya.
Another performing arts event is struggling to stay afloat in the city. The Vancouver Fringe Festival has launched an emergency fundraiser pleading for more cash. Its executive tells the early edition host Stephen Quinn that many festivals are grappling with inflation.
This is real for festivals, and it's a challenging moment for us. And that's why we're turning to our community and asking them to support us, because frankly, our expenses have gone up and our revenues have gone down as we're dealing with the same inflationary and affordability that everybody else is dealing with.
The festival, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, says it's cutting back the 2024 edition by roughly 1/3. Well, for several years now, the province has been grappling with a population of geese that used to be migratory but are now year-round residents. And while we've seen this problem in urban areas, it's also being seen in more rural areas as well. And this is causing a number of problems, including in marine estuaries on Vancouver Island. Radio Canada's Ben Livernoche went out to see how one group is tackling the problem.
In Qualicum Beach, biologist Gareth Ashley has a very special task, keeping Canada geese out of this river estuary.
I'm doing maintenance on our goose exclosures. It's the end of the year, end of November, so this time of year we're making sure that all of our exclosures are ready for the winter season. Canada goose is like an airplane and needs a bit of a runway. So with our tight exclosures, when we break up the flight path a little bit, Canada geese aren't able to access the areas exclosed by our ecocultural fencing.
Gareth is part of a group called Guardians of Our Salish Estuaries, an acronym that forms the word goose.
All right, guys, we got some posts to put down at the end here. Let's grab some alder.
It's a team made up of biologists like him, but also members of First Nations from throughout Vancouver Island. They aim to restore estuaries degraded by resident geese.
They'll eat away at the Lingby's sedge, which we always liken Lingby's sedge rhizomes to like rebars and concrete. It really holds that estuarine sediment together. So when geese come in with year-round grubbing, they haul out those sedges. A lot of these important sediments in the estuary will actually cave in off the banks, causing a lot of erosion. So then instead of nice, healthy dendritic channels within the estuary, you get widened out, very shallow channels that become very warm in the summer and have zero vegetative cover.
These estuaries are also important breeding grounds for Pacific salmon, an important and iconic species for the First Nations involved in the project.
Protecting the habitat for the salmon just means that every year we get a better chance of getting a better food fishery every year, which is just really important to us.
For some years now, in addition to using fences, the goose team have been destroying nests and sterilizing eggs by shaking them, a process called addling. It also organizes a hunt that targets resident goose populations. The meat is then offered to members of the community.
I always had a level of respect for Canadian geese whenever I would see them flying over, as they're very majestic birds. They are an amazing creature, but I do find that it's a mistake that we're trying to rectify.
It has been over 8 years since this goose restoration and control program was started, but it's a long-term project.
There is a delicate balance, and we don't know what that balance is, but we're going to do our absolute best to find the closest we can to that line. I find the best conservation is the least amount of effort. If you can put in the least amount of effort into something and see positive change, then I think you've done something pretty good.
Efforts, they say, are starting to yield results. Ben Livernosh, CBC News, Qualicum Beach.
Well, Formula racing is the pinnacle of motorsport in a world dominated by men. But an 18-year-old woman from Comox is consistently outpacing men on the Formula 3 circuit. As our Claire Palmer shows us, this racer wants to inspire other girls to get behind the wheel or under the hood.
Nicole Havrda is 18 years old and started racing cars on a track before she had her learner's permit to drive on city streets.
This is my 5th year, I think, and just like everything's gone kind of fast, actually.
As a kid, her parents brought her to an F1 Grand Prix in Austria. She didn't want to go at first, but then
I saw the atmosphere and stuff and just the sound of the cars and how, you know, the drivers are, and I just fell in love with everything about it.
Back home in Comox, she immediately got into go-kart racing and discovered a natural talent. Havrda became a national go-karting champion at 12 and raced GT for Mercedes at 14, before moving on to open-wheel formula cars at age 16, where she hits speeds of up to 250 kilometers an hour. One of her mentors is the Lynn St. James, one of just 9 women to race at the Indy 500.
She has a lot of potential, and I'm just hoping that she really makes and fulfills her potential, fulfills her dreams.
While she trains on the track in Texas, when she's here at home, she can be found in her simulator. Her parents say it's been nice to watch her career take off and pursue her love of racing.
It's really nice to watch her, how she races, and you know, her determination and the passion.
The girls, there's so few, and it's very nice to see it, nice to watch them. They are different, right? They have different passion, I guess.
For Havrda, the goal is clear, F1. But she still has several steps to go before she can hit the sport's top tracks. In the meantime, she wants to see girls get involved in all aspects of motorsports.
Everyone should look and be like, there's a woman in the garage fixing the car. That's super cool, right? We can do exactly what the men can do on the cars.
If you can see it, you can be it. But that is the case. And so the more women see other women doing it, like Nicole, the more Nicoles there are out there, the more successful Nicole is, the more women, young girls, are going to go, oh, maybe I can do this.
Havrda kicks off the 2024 season in April in the U.S., and she hopes next season to take her talents to the European F3 circuit and hopefully make the jump to F2. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Comox.
Well, still ahead, water can take all forms, solid, liquid, and gas, but can we benefit from all of them? We look at how researchers are finding ways to collect water from fog after the break. And thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. Alberta has declared an early start to the wildfire season, but what does the preparation look like? The CBC's Emily Fitzpatrick takes us inside that province's Wildfire Coordination Centre.
When a call comes in about a wildfire, this is where it's answered. And we got a tour inside to see how Alberta Wildfire responds.
We have weather stations all across Alberta.
The Alberta wildfire season has already begun, earlier than ever before.
We've had 40 new wildfires start here in Alberta, and last year our number was 14. And they, by this point, had only burned 3 hectares of land. And so far, these 40 fires have now burned 300 hectares in Alberta. So that is why we are preparing.
This is what that looks like. Each map and graph and department working together.
We're not on edge, we're preparing. We're getting ready, and as you saw, when we went to visit the people in the fire weather office in the AWCC, we are just ensuring that we have all the information where we know where the fire danger is going to be elevated. We have additional crews. We've been told we have the resources that we need, and we're going to make sure that we're putting them in the right areas so that we're ready to respond when we need to.
After a dry winter, how severe this upcoming season will be hangs on spring rain. Even so, they say fires are inevitable. So they're building on the lessons learned from the record-breaking 2023.
We tend to see the most wildfire activity start up in May, and so this year we are anticipating being majority staffed up and ready to go by mid-April. We want to ensure that we have extra firefighters in place, we have extra crews trained, we have resources in aircraft, we have night vision helicopters. We're adding 2 to our fleet, and that gives us the ability to fight fire at night when the activity is lowest.
2.2 million hectares burned in Alberta last season. It's a massive number Alberta Wildfire doesn't want to repeat. and hopes preparation is the difference maker for the upcoming season. Emily Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Edmonton.
This week, we are continuing our in-depth look at drought and how it's impacting the way we live. Water shortage is a serious threat in many parts of the province, especially on the islands and in rural communities. Some researchers, though, have developed a way to collect water now from fog. Our Darius Madavi joins us now to explain how this works. And Darius, I guess the obvious first question, how do you drink fog?
When you put it like that, it sounds crazy, especially because most people think of fog as a gas, like the air. But really, fog is just extremely tiny droplets of liquid water. And we say the droplets are suspended in the air because they fall so slowly, it looks like they're not moving at all. Now, what does that mean? Well, first, if you're walking through fog, you could make the argument that you're swimming. I'm not going to, but I do hope to see a lively debate in the comments when this gets posted. But more importantly, it means there may be an untapped source of water. And as one expert told me, that can be even more important following major fire events, like the ones we know all too well here in BC.
When that foliage isn't there, then the structures to collect the fog aren't there. So one of the things we can do is set up structures that will allow that collection of water to occur, at least to some extent, to help regrowth of the forest. That's one example. The other is if we want to use the water for our own purposes, then by setting up our own mesh, we have a better way to be able to route it. Trees are great fog catchers, but they're dripping it onto the ground. And it's more difficult to establish a way to collect the water from trees for us to use.
So practically speaking, what does this entail? How do you actually capture the fog?
It's actually pretty straightforward. It just requires some investment in the basic infrastructure. You basically need some sturdy poles, some vertical mesh or netting, just typically made out of plastic nowadays, and then a collection and holding system. There's a lot of research being done actively into creating better materials to make those fog nets. But even the technology we have now and had a decade ago can be really efficient.
There's a village in Chile that once used fog collection technology for about 10 years. And that was a village of about 300 people. And they had, at their maximum, they had about 150 square meter mesh several kilometers above the village in an area that receives a lot of fog in the mountainous area above the village.
According to Fernandez, that setup was enough to provide water to the entire village for the full decade it operated, which definitely shows the promise of this solution. And he also mentioned the amount of water that you can get from this really comes down to the amount of netting you have and the size of it, and it can range anywhere from 1 liter per square meter per day to up to 20 liters. So it really could be a significant amount.
Sounds promising, no doubt, but how do we know if it will work here in BC specifically?
You really do just have to try it. There's a lot of variables at play here. And Fernandez had another great line. He said, not all fogs are created equal. The size of the droplets and how many there are really determine how much water that fog holds. But some parts of BC are definitely well suited for at least a trial run. You'd want to try this in places that A, have seen severe water shortages in recent years, B, get a ton of fog, and C, have that reliable foggy season happen when rain is scarce, which means at those times water shortages are most likely, fog could be an untapped and useful source. So I don't know about you, but when I hear those criteria, my mind immediately goes to remote places, especially on Vancouver Island and on its west coast. A former colleague of mine experienced one of those water shortages just last summer on Nootka Island, about 70 kilometers up the coast from Tofino, where there was a near complete lack of rain for months on end. She told me there was definitely times this technology would have come in handy.
We were facing a pretty big water shortage and had to employ lots of water conservation methods. However, as a lot of people may have heard, August is commonly referred to as Fogust, where that area has pretty dense and frequent fog. So this idea of fog capture is definitely something that could be used in these areas.
For places like Nootka Island, the idea of pulling water out of thin air is definitely an appealing one.
And no doubt, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for this. That's science and climate specialist Darius Madavi. Up next, the end of a nightly TikTok binge might be near, for Americans at least. Why U.S. Congress has moved a step closer to a crackdown on the social media platform. Stay with us.
In the prairies, we have a bird that's famous for its unusual mating dance, but it's a dance we might not see much longer in Western Canada. Each spring, the greater sage-grouse makes quite the spectacle. Males flock to traditional mating grounds known as leks. They puff up their chests and swish their wings, all in an attempt to woo a mate. And then it's a matter of lady's choice. The other thing these birds are known for is just how few of them are left. The species has been endangered for decades, and the latest numbers don't provide a lot of hope about their future in Canada's west. Conservationists say it may be too late to bring back existing populations from the brink.
They are going to go extinct. It's almost certain. We can't sustain a population that small, especially given climate change effects that are causing more frequent droughts. And everybody knows we're headed for a drought this year. We'll probably lose them this year.
Sage-grouse used to number in the thousands, but there are now fewer than 100 birds believed to remain in the West, and their range in the grasslands continues to shrink. Alberta's latest census found only 45 remain in the province. The decline of sage-grouse has been blamed on habitat loss, and conservationists are trying to restore that critical habitat and preserve those few stretches of grassland that remain untouched.
There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of people working in that direction. Could we lose sage-grouse still? That's a real possibility. Should we throw up our hands and quit trying because that's a possibility? I don't think so.
Conservationists are hopeful that existing populations can hold on long enough to benefit from those restoration efforts. And in an attempt to bolster existing numbers, some hens captured from Montana will be released onto the prairie this spring. So when sage-grouse return to their traditional mating grounds this spring, scientists will be watching closely and hoping these birds will keep dancing in Canada a little longer. Wallace Snowden, CBC News, Edmonton.
Overseas aid is piling up at a border point between Egypt and Israel. Truckloads of supplies are waiting for clearance to get into Gaza. Efforts are also underway to get the relief in by air and by sea, but by land is still the most effective method. The CBC's Margaret Evans reports from that border.
We are standing along the border between Israel and Egypt. If you look on the other side of this fence, you can see a row of trucks packed with aid destined for Gaza. Of course, it's not getting there fast enough, and not enough is getting in. They're in the lineup here because they have to come across the border into Israel, where the Israelis will check to ensure that they're satisfied with what's going into Gaza. They then go back out and go further down to another entry point into Gaza. The people you can see behind me here are Israelis who have been trying to stop any humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. They say it winds up in the hands of Hamas, and they're not concerned with the humanitarian impact on Gazans. They say that is simply a cost of war.
The army needs to finish this war. And when that is over, there can be a future for the Gazan people. But first, Hamas needs to be eliminated.
We know from the United Nations that a quarter of the population in Gaza is on the brink of famine. Health officials from the Gazan-run health ministry say at least 25 children have now died of acute malnutrition. Their international community is so frustrated with the number of trucks Israel is allowing to get in. They are now trying airdrops. They're talking about a humanitarian sea corridor coming from Cyprus. And we're hearing about potential attempts at another land crossing in the north. But aid agencies will tell you it's not coming fast enough, and the suffering is destined to continue unless something is done very quickly. Margaret Evans, CBC News, along the Israeli-Egyptian border.
A Vancouver man just returned from Gaza after a week-long volunteer trip, dropping off much-needed medical supplies. He spoke to the Early Edition from Egypt.
You could see the eyes of the medical worker there. Everybody, it's like I'm getting them a lottery or something they've been waiting desperately for, because they are almost handcuffed, or they have no supply anymore.
He says he saw many patients suffering from serious burns and others who are severely malnourished. Stateside Congress has passed a bill that could lead to a nationwide ban on TikTok. The politicians are concerned about its parent company's ties to the Chinese government and the security of American users. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington and reports the bill will now go to the Senate.
The rules are suspended. The bill is passed.
In an overwhelming bipartisan majority, lawmakers in the House of Representatives voted to ban the wildly popular social media app TikTok in the U.S. unless it divests itself from its Chinese-owned parent company within 6 months.
TikTok is a threat to our national security because it is owned by ByteDance, which does the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. We know this because ByteDance leadership says so, and because Chinese law requires it.
In a rare show of unity, both Democrats and Republicans mostly voted in favor, with some opponents warning the move is government outreach.
The bill is written so broadly that the president could abuse that discretion and include other companies that aren't just social media companies.
Keep TikTok! Keep TikTok! Outside Capitol Hill, TikTok supporters and influencers protested the vote, saying banning TikTok bans freedom of expression and hurts the economy.
This app is so much more than just an app for dumb TikTok dances. This is a life-changing app. So many people, not only 5 million small businesses rely on it, but 170 million people rely on this app for more than just their livelihood.
The controversial bill now heads to the Senate, where its fate is unclear. TikTok plans to aggressively lobby senators to reverse course.
I still have concerns about naming a specific company in legislation, but it feels like this House bill has momentum.
Now, some senators warn you don't win elections by cutting out a large group of young voters who are big fans of this social media app. President Joe Biden has said he would sign a law banning TikTok if it's passed in Congress, while former President Trump, who pushed for a ban in office, is now opposed. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Still ahead, we continue our extensive coverage of Boeing. 5 years after a pair of deadly crashes, we look at how the company is trying to salvage its reputation. That's next.
Life magazines with sports heroes like Mickey Mantle and Muhammad Ali on the covers, autographed baseballs by some of the greats like Berra and Griffey Sr. and Jr. They are just some of the donations that were dropped off with Tim Goodwin at Hope Mission a couple months ago. The group provides support to families experiencing poverty and homelessness.
We get a lot of donations of food and supplies and that. Somebody coming in with something like this, I don't know of anybody here that's experienced it before.
It's not only sports memorabilia, old New York Times newspapers from the early 1900s, a Saturday Evening Post featuring John F. Kennedy issued after the assassination. The woman who donated the items from her late husband's collection wants revenue from selling them to benefit the children. But Goodwin, who is a lay preacher at the mission, says he is no auctioneer.
I have enough fun with a microphone. I don't think they want me talking that fast.
1969. Dallas Morrison is a co-owner of the Morrison Trading Post in Airdrie, specializing in sports. He says looking at images of the items, there is some potential value there, but legitimizing them is important.
So that when you go to sell that item, the buyer can look at it and they have trust and faith that they're buying the right item, that it is real and that there's nothing nefarious about it.
Morrison says he is happy to help out by having a closer look at the sports items. Goodwin is hoping to find a buyer or buyers by the summer. Terry Trimbath, CBC News, Calgary.
Our Darius Madavi is back with a long-range forecast. Darius, sounds like a pretty boring but welcoming forecast you've got for us.
For 90% of the province, yes. And what we can see on radar really backs that up, suggests that's the case. We see a little bit of precipitation just around Prince George, not Prince Rupert. But beyond that, we don't really see much more on this besides all that cloud moving in, which is a good depiction of that cloud starting to move through. Should continue to clear up over the next few days. What this doesn't capture, though, because we don't have radar coverage up in the northwest, is a pretty strong system hitting there. We are seeing some blizzard-like conditions up in the northwest. So do keep that in mind. There is still a little bit of activity happening, but even that should start to clear up as we get into the weekend, and that high-pressure system continues to build over the province. So For now, what we're looking at is a little bit more precipitation coming to those parts up in the northwest. Seeing those blizzard conditions as well. But for the most part, for the vast majority of the province, we're seeing some very calm conditions and not really too much at all. Just in those northern mountain ranges where we're going to see that a little bit more snow on the way. But for the rest of the province, it doesn't look like much more snow anytime soon. If we take a look at our temperatures over the next few days, today, again, very warm, especially for the southern parts of the province, into the double digits for the vast majority of places, except at those higher elevations. As we look over the next few days, those temperatures continue to come up. Tomorrow, a big spike as well for the more northern parts of the province, but that part doesn't last. Those temperatures are expected to drop again by Friday, although they should continue to climb again into the weekend and maybe early next week. We may see those temperatures come up again, but for now, a little bit more of that cooler air coming in from the north, keeping them low. But for the southern parts of the province, very warm, hitting almost 20 degrees by Friday. By the weekend, we will expect to hit 20 across several parts of the province, especially in the valley, so be ready for that. If we take a look at our forecast for tonight, even those lows are starting to come up in many places, although still seeing some negatives in places like the Thompson, but around Kamloops, but we will continue to see those highs climb as much as 4 or 5 degrees over the next few days. For the highs, though, they are climbing even more. We are going to see those very nice conditions throughout the southern parts of BC, but still a little bit of activity in the north into tomorrow. And then as we zoom into Vancouver, a very consistent, very boring, very easy to cover forecast for me. We see the return of those inland temperatures because, again, they will be quite a bit warmer in many places, as much as 5 or 6 degrees. But generally speaking, lots of sun. Should be a nice weekend to get out and do all the things that you've missed the last few weeks. It seems like this might be that weekend, that first summer weekend where everybody gets sunburned. Yes. Even after being out for just a few minutes, since we're not used to that sun. So thank you for that PSA, Darius. So we'll talk to you a bit later. Thanks, Tanya. Well, last night we brought you the first part of a series looking into Boeing and whether its planes are any safer 5 years after a pair of deadly crashes involving 737 MAX 8s. Tonight, Susan Ormiston explores Boeing's plummeting reputation and the company's struggle to salvage it.
Ever since Boeing's 2 catastrophic crashes, the airline giant has been under intense scrutiny, with a lot to fix, not the least of all, its reputation.
So there were no survivors.
Ethiopian Air Flight 302 took off from Addis Ababa on March 10th, 2019, and crashed 6 minutes later. Among the Canadian passengers headed to Kenya was Paul Njoroge's family, his wife, his kids, and his mother-in-law. All died.
I booked the flights for them. They must have cried out there, Daddy. That's what breaks my heart.
The pilots had struggled to control the plane, which climbed and pitched under a new software system called MCAS before diving into the ground. Ultimately, the MAX 8 aircraft were grounded for well over a year. Since it's like this all over the world, the entire fleet is grounded and no date set. Chris Moore's daughter, Danielle, died on that Ethiopian Airlines flight. She was 24 years old, from Scarborough, Ontario, headed to Kenya for an environmental conference.
Cradle me, I'll cradle you. I'll win your heart with a woo.
You know, we lost a beautiful person 5 years ago.
His grief and anger was triggered again with the Alaska Airlines blowout.
Yeah, I was thinking about the day that my wife received the call, and she screamed out, "Danielle's dead."
Guilty. I feel guilty.
5 years ago, we spoke with Chris and his wife Clarisse after Danielle died.
Every morning, every night is always a struggle. And as what Chris said, it's the new norm, but I don't like the new norm. I want my old norm. Yeah.
Since then, almost daily, Chris has been researching Boeing and aviation safety.
What is that 6 minutes?
This is part of my new life now, this tragedy, this grief, and I need to engage myself in bringing about some justice and ensuring that the aviation industry can take a more positive approach in treating people with dignity and ensuring their safety. The individuals, the flyers, have been ignored through this whole process. It's all about the money.
From 2019 to now, he's been pursuing justice for his daughter's death. Part of a group of families that's dogged Boeing in court and on Capitol Hill in Washington.
Trying to make as much money as possible.
He and Clarisse watched as Boeing's former CEO, Dennis Muhlenberg, testified before a congressional committee, promising to improve safety then.
On behalf of myself and the Boeing company, we are sorry, deeply and truly sorry.
Cold comfort for the families who'd lost so much. Boeing finally admitted it installed the MCAS control system on the MAX 8 without training pilots and without revealing it to them or the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority. At the time, the Department of Justice said Boeing's employees chose the path of profit over candor by concealing material information from the FAA. In 2021, Boeing agreed to pay a $2.5 billion fraud settlement, with $500 million going to the families. Boeing avoided a criminal charge by striking an agreement with the Department of Justice to defer prosecution if it could maintain safety compliance for 3 years. The door plug on Alaska Airlines blew out 2 days before that agreement expired. The Justice Department now must decide, in light of the Alaska Airlines incident, what it will do.
How are you? Hey, everybody.
9 families are still pressing for criminal charges. They meet virtually nearly every week.
Nobody is happy with the way Boeing has been handled with kid gloves throughout this tragedy. We are still reeling from the grief, from that crash.
Boeing did agree to pay money to the families and to other entities. Why isn't that enough?
Money is the last thing on my mind in terms of justice. Justice is about holding somebody accountable. 346 people died, and no one has been held to account.
We, the Boeing company, are under a tremendous amount of scrutiny, and what I will say is...
Following the Alaska airline blowout, Boeing's 737 program took a day-long break to focus on quality.
The most powerful tool we have is our people.
A month later, Ed Clark, the 737 executive, was ousted from Boeing. But the damage to the company is adding up, says the pilot, Dennis Tager, who also speaks on behalf of the American Airlines Pilots Union.
Yeah, we've got a problem here. When Boeing management takes an amazing company, which was built on engineering and a moral and principled obligation to keep people safe no matter what, was replaced by managers who were studying the spreadsheet, bad things happen.
You still fly Boeing?
Yes, I do.
You fly the MAX?
I do. Just flew it last week.
No concerns about safety?
When I fly the MAX, my alert status is on high. It just is.
Would I get on a MAX airplane today? The answer is yes. I would get on a MAX airplane because I know it's gone through the looking glass, it's gone through the microscope.
But it's cost deeply. 346 lives lost, and Boeing now under new scrutiny.
Chris, do you think that Boeing is any safer today than 5 years ago?
I think they're slightly safer because they have the Department of Justice looking over their shoulder.
Do you still fly?
Nope, don't fly at all.
Not at all?
No, I've basically taken myself out of that. I will not support the industry that way.
Hey, pumpkin.
The memories of Danielle, too fresh. He refuses to back down. He's simply lost too much.
And the CBC's Susan Ormiston with that report. Up next, he's not your typical resident. A tiny alligator is now living in Victoria at some gardens after being seized by federal officials. We'll tell you about his journey after the break. Stay with us.
I'm Piper.
And I'm Paul.
And these are our world-class memories. Let's go for it. Let's see what the first one is. Oh. Mary Poppins. One of the biggest memories in that costume, because it was our first Worlds together in London. And I just remember the Canadian crowd like seriously going wild. Because we were first to skate in the event because we didn't really have any world ranking points. So we had to open at home. But it was so cool to see all the Canadian flags. Like they were roaring before our names were called.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite memories from this Worlds actually was, I think it was after the free dance, but we were kind of walking around backstage. Someone was bringing us somewhere. I don't know if we had to do a press conference or if we were going to doping, or I don't know. Someone was leading us, but we bumped into Tyler Cranston, and it was our first time meeting him. The only time we both met him, and he just kind of dramatically fell to his knees and started saying how much he enjoyed our skating. That's something we still talk about all the time, and it was a really special memory that we have, I think, with these programs specifically.
Oh, gosh. So the Hitchcock free dance, I had my eyes set on doing something like this. I had a Alexander McQueen book. I asked our dressmaker if we could paint on top of the fabric, and she's like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a try.
Well, I think this dress too, because there's so many crystals and so much glue, you had to add to the bodysuit after the stones were stuck on, because the bodysuit fit perfectly, but once all the stones were on, it stretched less, and then we had to have fabric to it, which was quite funny.
Yeah. For the short dance specifically, this blue outfit, what people don't know is in Japan, the traffic is crazy. And we decided with our coach that it was a great idea to go back
to the hotel between the practice and the competition.
Yeah, and we chose wrong, and we were on the bus for about 2 hours to get back to the venue, and they had to hold the event a little bit, and we had
no time to warm up.
No time to warm up. Like it was like 15 minutes from the moment we got there to competing. This moment was, I don't know, I just look at our faces like super calm, but internally we were freaking out. Do the honors.
Here we go.
Oh yeah. I don't remember this program.
How it went,
I really don't know.
I think we skated fine. This Paso Doble costume, we really wanted to show the effect of Piper embodying the cape, and so the skirt attached to her wrist, and there was a big learning curve with that. We had to get a practice skirt made because there are certain times where I had to grab it. Like sometimes I had to grab under the cape, and sometimes I had to grab through the gap, and I had to kind of learn where those spots were. And so it took kind of practicing with it on the daily. It was just kind of like a little capey skirt thing on a waistband.
On an elastic.
That you just kind of throw on over her clothes.
Well, the Butterfly Gardens in Victoria have a new exotic resident who's really quite far away from home.
It's a juvenile Cuvier's dwarf caiman named Javier. We spoke to the garden's animal curator, who told us more about the reptile and how he found his way to his new home.
Javier is about 18 inches long right now and about 450 grams. So still a juvenile, quite young in comparison to other crocodiles and alligators, pretty small. We got an email one day that Javier needed a home. So Javier is in the legal care of Environment and Climate Change Canada right now, and we are holding him temporarily for them. It's actually part of a court case. And while that's ongoing, which we have no idea how long that'll take, it can be years sometimes, it's going to be living here with us. They're a member of the crocodilian family from Central America, and the Cuvier's dwarf is actually the smallest species of all of them. So caiman are considered a controlled alien species here. So that is any animal that the government needs to regulate for the safety of everyone. So right now, Javier is living in a 180-gallon glass tank. Inside, we keep it at about 50% water. They're not a fully aquatic animal, but it is very important that they have swimming space. So he's in an area where people can see him in his tank as he goes about his day. So he's also got an island to bask on. So he can go swimming if he needs to cool down, come out and bask if he needs to warm up. And then in there, we have a variety of driftwood and live plants right now, just to make it as natural as we can while still being in captivity. We were actually a little concerned when he first moved in, because like any animal going through a big change, often they can be stressed. Going into a new environment, especially taking a trip on a ferry in a vehicle to get here, that can often cause stress. Animals can go off food, they can be uncomfortable, but he was immediately out basking, he was swimming around, he's been eating lots and regularly, so at no point has he shown any stress about being here, any aversion to having people walking around the tank, so we've been pleasantly surprised with that.
You know, my apartment doesn't let me have dogs, but I feel like I could get one of those.
I think you could. Just tell them you've got a roommate, Javier. They'll be fine with it. That is your 6 o'clock news for this Wednesday, March 13th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. And you can always find us online at cbc.ca/BC.
We will have your next local newscast at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Thanks for being with us.
Good night.